Hello, hello. Okay, there we go. I think my mic's unmuted now. All right, good day, everybody. Welcome to this month's Rust Gamedev Meetup. We have a few presentations for today, and so we'll be hearing from Kvark about Blade, we'll be hearing from Keevan about Graphite, and then I'll be doing a little bit of a section on Veloren since we had a recent release. But before we get started, I just want to point out we did just have the main newsletter for the Rust Gamedev, or the Rust Gamedev newsletter come out about a week and a bit ago, and so do be sure to check that out. But as always with the Rust Gamedev meetups, I do want to encourage people to go check out this month's newsletter. If you've been working on some cool stuff, do go and add a section about it to the newsletter. We love having new contributions. We love people coming and talking about what they're working on. Or if you just want to contribute, there's a lot of sections that could use a hand getting written. And so we have that issue open on the Rust Gamedev website. And so if you just go to issues, it's just the top one up here. But with that being said, we'll hop right into the content for today. And so we should be back in just a second. Oh, and I should also mention my logistics today are a little bit interesting. I'm like using my laptop, and so trying to switch between stuff might be a little bit finicky here and there. But we'll be back in just a second with Kvark to tell us about the updates on Blade. All right, so hello, Kvark. Welcome back again, talking about Blade. I think it's been a few months since we've heard progress, or maybe last month. I forget if we had you on last month, but I'll let you take it away and tell us what you've been up to.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, I was just talking last month actually, and I wanted to follow up on some things I did. And for people who missed the last month, I will remind that this is a poorly made presentation, and that Blade is a sort of a graphics solution that I'm developing for the new generation of hardware and new generation of games, where everything is going to be ray traced, and that's the focus. But it also comes with a low-level GPU API that is unsafe and very nice to use for these purposes, which you can use for rasterization as well. I think this topic has been made a little bit more heated now with Meta releases of their own graphics layer. So more competition, more fun. So last month I was talking about the asset pipeline, and it all sounded very nice, and I had textures compressed and all. And I'm just going through the slides. I showed how the texture compression is happening on multiple threads, how it's cached, and I listed a bunch of the future work there. And I would like to talk more about that. So source dependencies is where you have an asset, but it also needs a different file to be loaded. So your asset is spread over different files, and they're considered dependencies. You can imagine a shader having an include is one of the examples of this. And then hot reloading, obviously, is mostly applicable to the shaders as well. So these three items that we have here, they are all about shaders. And I decided to focus on this part and get some shaders converted to assets and hot reloaded. So this now works, and this is how it looks roughly. So let's say this is one of the shaders. This is a Wigzell shader, and at the top of it, we have a bunch of includes in a style not far from C. The includes work exactly in the way that you would expect them to work. They just include the contents. But the neat thing about this is that on the low level, the Blade graphics works with the valid Wigzell sources. So all of the includes here are resolved at the asset pipeline level when the shader is loaded, and then it builds. The product of it is basically one source that's getting saved to disk, and then unloaded, just loaded into Blade graphics. So these includes add custom syntax, but it's the custom syntax at the high level of Blade. It's only for the render module, not for the low level part, which remains loyal to the canonical Wigzell. Now, Okay, this is fairly trivial. Let's show something else. Let's say we're loading a scene. This is my scene that I'm mostly working on. And we want to change something in the scene. So we go here and say, hey, Beto, I want it to be more red. So I'm gonna multiply by something like this. Oh, and it's blue. Why are you blue? That's an interesting. Oh, that's what I typed, right? That's what I typed. Yeah. More red. Yes. So it's all automatically reloaded, recompiled, and all of the pipelines are created for you that depend on it. Some of the hot reloading logic is handled at the asset pipeline itself. Some of it is handled on the client side because it needs to know which pipelines depend on it and so forth. So there's a combination of effort. But the point is that developing in this scheme is really nice. And what my favorite feature about it is that if I made a mistake here, it's not crashing. Instead, it just tells me on the console, hey, here's your mistake, and I'm still uses the old pipelines. So I can safely develop this without worrying that something is gonna crash with hot reloading. I know this is not like rocket science to do, but it's a good addition to Blade, at least to get that going. I also have another thing that I don't think maybe some other projects will not feature is flags. So one of the problems I have with the shader interop was that you would want to control some of the aspects of the interop from the Rust side. And you would define some bit flags there and enums there, and then you would map them to the shader. You would make sure they match, and then you would change one and forget to change the other. So I wanted this to be transparent. So here we can see two things. One is the enum and a few bit flags. And the enum derives the strum enum iter. Strum is basically a library that exists today, and that allows reflection of enums. And the bit flags, they don't need anything else. I added one more thing as primitive to the enum. This is the in macros, so that we can basically cast to and from integers. It's very trivial to do. Unfortunately, enums, even though you can cast them today with the something as a U32, for example, it's not encoded in the type system that you can do it. So what this does is encodes it as like a trait. Maybe that's going to be resolved in future language versions. I don't know. So once we have enum deriving these things, and then bit flags don't need to derive anything, I register them with the shader loader in the asset pipeline. I say, hey, you should know that there's this enum there. Just register it, register some bit flags. And now it understands what those are. It can reflect them. It can understand when the shader uses them. So in the shader, it may look like this. I want to use this thing, debug mode, which means it's going to look up from the asset pipeline side and see maybe it's an enum, maybe it's a bit flag. The point is that it introduces a few constants in the namespace that you can use, such as this one. It's basically the usename underscore, and here is a bit flag or the enum variant. So I can use those bit flags and enums in the shaders directly. This is also made nicer by the fact that I can reflect the bit flags into UI. So those draw, debug, and ignore textures, they are not hard-coded, they're just reflected from bit flags. For example, I can say, and this enum as well. I can say draw normal. So this is the mode where we draw the normals. or I can say, I want to debug my geometry. And here we're slowly transitioning to the next part of the talk, which is the geometry has a thing called tangent space. Can we get this? Oh, interesting. Yeah, we can get this. It's a little bit noisy, so it's probably hard to see. I'm gonna remove some of the noise here. Interesting. I think something might have broken with this selection for me. It's not exactly selecting what I wanted to select, but it selects something, so I'll fix that later. What we can see here, roughly, is that we selected the polygon, and it draws the shape of the polygon. It draws the normals, the vertex normals of the polygon. And in the middle here, it draws the tangential space of the polygon. So the tangent, bitangent, and normal. This tangential space is in a weird area, which is not the vertex space. It's like it's a normal map space. So it's the highest or the lowest, depending on how you look at it, level possible for the tangents. We build the tangential space, then we load the normal from the normal map. Then we interpret this in the tangent space, and then we build a new space based on this normal. So this is like a normal. This is a space in which your pixel normal is 0, 0, 1, basically. And it's useful for shading later on. And this geometry rendering allows me to look at things. Okay, so I'm gonna reset this. The tangent space is complicated by a lot of factors, and there are easy ways to compute it or hard ways to compute it. The industry standard today is to use the MIG-T space as a library and an algorithm for computing the tangent space. And what I have here is that I want to show you how it's loaded live. So I'm going to delete the cached GLTF from disk. I'm going to make sure my Tracy is working. Okay, Tracy is looking for input. I'm going to load the same scene again. See what's happening here. Yep. These are some of the textures, and these are the tangent space generation. It's a very heavy operation. It goes through the mesh data, it reshuffles it, reindexes the data, and builds the tangents for the normal space interpretation. And you can see those chunks of loading, they are spread over all of the threads simultaneously, so that the load itself is very fast, even though we just deleted the whole cached GLTF file. So this is one of the new features that I got, is that I can not only generate the proper tangent space, I can do it efficiently using my task system with Quire on all the threads. And it's so fast that you can basically debug and iterate even in release mode, but in debug mode. How does it look exactly? With so much noise here, I don't think we can have a proper look at the normal map. You can see some of that here, I guess. But this is the difference. I guess I can just I can show the normals and say, so this is normal mapped surface, and this is non-normal mapped. It's roughly similar. There's a lot of noise there. I'm not exactly sure it's correct yet. It looks somewhat sensible. If I look at different parts like these ones, look somewhat reasonable, but I'm going to continue working on this and see how it turns out. So this is the other thing I did. This is what I wanted to show. What I'm not talking about also, I'm just giving a glimpse is, is how it's all noisy and how it's all rendered. If you remember the last talks, this is part of the noise is because we have such a detailed normal map now, and reducing this noise is a whole adventure. It requires a denoising solution, and it requires the LOD computation for textures that we sample, something that with ray tracing is much more complicated than rasterization. So I'm going to be working on this. But what you can already see, it's probably easier to show on the basic scene, not on this one. Oh, even without these features. Yeah. Okay. It's a little bit annoying that we have to disable one of the commands for tracing initialization. So here it's probably easier to see. Like I can move my camera, and you can see that the image quality is largely preserved. You can see a lot of noise along the edges, which is expected, like contrast areas. But otherwise, I can move around, I can rotate, and it's largely the same. So this is the proper spatial temporal reuse that is implemented, and it deserves a separate talk about this. I just want to make sure that there's something to like catch an eye before talking about this. Yeah, so today we talked about the shader hot reloading, which are assets now, and tangent space generated on all the threads. That's pretty much it.
All right, awesome. So I think a few things I'm curious about. So in showing off Blade before, we've talked about how there's a lot of optimizations for doing ray tracing, and like specifically how you're doing it is sort of like different than classical ray tracing. If I'm not mistaken, it's CPU bound.
No. There's no CPU involved.
Okay,
It's all
okay,
completely on
yeah, yeah.
GPU.
Okay.
The difference with what when people talk about classical, they often mean the Monte Carlo ray tracing or path tracing, where you're just shooting the rays in random directions and try to average what comes out of it. And this is just not scalable because there's so many directions to shoot. And once you start thinking about, oh, I should probably shoot more rays towards the bright areas or where the light is. But if I do this, how do I statistically average those rays? So once you start asking that question, it goes into like deep hole of statistical analysis and spatial and temporal reuse of other samples, of nearby samples. That is the real complexity behind optimizing this. And this is what is doing here. I'm doing the spatial temporal reuse, or REST here, it's called by NVIDIA. And I'm using the pairwise multiple importance sampling to debias different samples from each other. This is all pretty complicated, and it all works. The only reason why it's not looking that well is because I don't have a final denoiser, the thing that's very important in NVIDIA pipeline that smoothes things out.
Okay. So I see what you mean. So when it comes to like the aberrations and this as you're moving around, this is just because it's trying to do an optimization where it's like reusing the stuff that it had nearby. And I was sort of curious, when it comes to a denoiser, would it be able to handle the like that as well as you're moving around?
Yes. It's obviously there's a lot of complexity about this. And just to clarify, what we see here is that you can see more contrast along the edges is because some of the pixels are not able to efficiently reuse their neighbors anymore when you move around. So this is also something that I can work on and make better, but it's largely expected that we do that. It's like when you reproject your pixel along the edge on the previous frame, it may turn out that a different shape, like if there's two faces at the pixel, you happen to have one of the faces today, and the last frame, if you reproject, there was another face looking. So these faces will produce you different statistics, and I have a rejection mechanism for those faces. So along the edges, when you move, it requires special care to be able to reuse those samples. It's not as easy. And that's what we're seeing here.
Awesome. One more question I had. You talked about this idea a little bit of trying to encode something in Rust type system, but it wasn't really there, so you came up with like a temporary band-aid fix, and it can be done later. I'm curious, when you come across these things that you want to represent in the type system, or you want to represent some type of state that's enforced by the type system, how often do you find that it's like easy to do that versus you have to do a band-aid versus you have to like try to come up with some really complex solution and it doesn't work, and so you just do something else for now?
So far, my experience was that just doing it yourself with the macros library in your product is the simplest way. So this, as primitive, there's a long list of discussions in Rust as to how to expose in type system that you can cast like enums to integers. And this discussion is probably not going to end tomorrow. But just writing it yourself here is like, this is all the code. Like, this is nothing. You can have that. It's not a big maintenance burden to have that.
Interesting. I've never seen like this. I've heard about the woes of this discussion, but having like a macro fix to it. I think for myself, as like someone who's done Rust for a while, but not incredibly deep, I haven't really dove into macros as just another way to add bandages. But it seems like if you go down this path, you have a lot of capabilities you can use.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then finally, so in Tracy, if I understood it correctly, you were showing the amount of time it took to do the loading of the asset and storing it to the file, like your cached file, right? Like this, that's what this is.
Yeah. You can see tangent generation, and it takes like 1.7 seconds for the whole giant multi-gigabyte scene, but it only happens after we parse the GLTF, which it takes another like 400 milliseconds.
Okay, and I mean, from what I understand about Tracy, like essentially you have all these like different worker threads, and because we see that each thread is basically having work the entire time, it's relatively well distributed and what like a pretty parallel problem, and that like that's sort of how you read that, right?
Yeah. The fact that all of them are busy is the success story here.
Nice. Okay, super cool, super cool. Yeah, it's awesome hearing about these updates to Blade and kind of like the optimizations here and there that are going on. Yeah, so thank you very much, Quark, for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
All right, so we are back with Kevin, who's going to give us this month's update in Graphite.
Hello. Yes. So just for those tuning in for the first time, a very quick overview of Graphite. This is aiming to build an open source 2D graphics editor where most of our backend code is written in Rust, besides a small layer of web-based code for our front end, which will eventually also be replaced by Rust code once the Rust GUI ecosystem is up to the task. This is a quick screenshot from where we were a couple months ago, and we've made additional small improvements since then from this screenshot. Basically, we're aiming to build a node-based vector editor and raster editor. And we started out with vector, but now we're working towards raster as well. and the entire data model for your document will be stored in a node graph where the tools modify that document for you. So hopefully that was a quick overview. And now we jump into also some quick progress updates. This past month has been mostly me taking a vacation and also traveling and visiting with our lead engineer on the project. His name is True Doctor, and I'm actually in his room right now. Unfortunately, he could not be here to co-present with me right now, but I'm visiting him in Germany. So the Sprint 27, which has been our, I guess, basically our 27th month of work, we've been working on some quality of life improvements for the vector editing process. So first of all, we can now do box selection of points, and I can quickly show what that looks like. So we go ahead and create a document, and then we end up making, let's just say, a shape. I'm not great at creating something on demand, so I'm just going to make some blob shapes here. But now I can actually do a box selection by dragging around like this and select those points, and that allows me to drag them around. So again, you select that. Now you can drag these. Next up, I'm going to do rapid fire here to keep this quick. Next, we can also do drawing of stars. So previously we had the polygon tool, and this works like this. But now we can go over to star and draw a star. And you can change the number of sides. So we can go to a 6-sided star and you end up with this, or a 7-sided star and you end up like this. And again, if you go back to polygon, that's what a 7-sided polygon looks like. And you can easily switch between star and polygon. So a 3-sided star, for example, would basically just look like a triangle. And likewise, at least a 4-sided star would look a little bit more like sort of a diamond shape, even though, because the angles do end up being like that. Whereas the triangle actually has the points in the middle, but they happen to be collinear, so that's why it looks like a triangle. Anyways, that is the star tool. So continuing with the rapid fire here, we also have improved the node graph insertion menu. So if you take a look at the node graph, and I'm just going to open up one of the shapes. So for a quick overview of this, we have the shape itself. Then it feeds through a transform node, and that allows you to position it somewhere. So I'm going to, let's say, have 100 as the pixel, 100 pixels to the right on the x-axis. As we can see it moved, we can give it a fill color, we can give it a stroke color, and so now it's that blue color, that purple color, and give it, let's say, 25 pixel width stroke. So those are the nodes that basically build up the style information for this. But you can also add things now with this new menu, and this categorizes it. So for example, general, we have some things that we're actually they're not exactly user facing in the moment. We do have to sort of categorize these still and hide some of the ones that are more structural as opposed to user facing. But for example, we could take an image or take any other shape, and so for example, here's a math node. We can't actually do anything with that because we don't have value nodes, but we do have a math node just for completeness or just for it existing. But yeah, we also have, for example, the brush node, and now I can run this brush node through a hue saturation value, and you can see it now is inside of this category. So this add nodes menu basically, improves upon the user experience for sorting through and selecting different nodes. So you can search it, and you can also just browse it. But yeah, that is basically all of the major improvements that we've had in a visible way. The non-visible improvements has been a behind-the-scenes work on our node graph system, which we call Graphene. Basically, that has worked towards some significant improvements to its overall engineering work. It's a little hard to describe because it requires a good amount of background detail, but that has been progressing, and we will continue to make some design work on it while I am visiting here in Germany with our co-engineer, or with our lead engineer, and that will then trickle down into a bunch of new improvements over the coming months. With that said, if you want to get involved, we've actually had a couple of new contributors recently in the past month or so that have been working on some of these features that I just showed off. So if you want to be one of those contributors, it's reasonably easy to get involved because we do make an effort to make it very approachable for new contributors. If you've had bad experiences with other open source projects, we really try and keep it friendly and keep it approachable to people. So please give it a shot and come join our Discord server and chat with us about how you can help and how you can get involved. Yeah, that's the end. Keeping it short today. Do we have any questions?
Awesome, perfect. I don't think too many questions from the chat, but one thing I was sort of curious about is like, yeah, so you going and visiting like the team and stuff like that. So as like an open source project, I'm kind of curious, like I mean, you've been leading it for quite a while, but is this like sort of like the first time you've met people on the team that are working on Graphite?
At least the ones that I haven't recruited from my own, from my own knowing them personally. So the people that I've met purely online. But then some of the people that I know in real life, because I recruited them, those are the people obviously that I have met before now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super exciting. Like with Veloren, I was able to meet Zester when I went to England, and so we were able to like spend some time together and stuff like that. And for me, I think it's just like very surreal to be working on like this online project where you talk with people over the internet and you like do video chat and stuff like that, and then you got to go like see them in person and stuff like that. Yeah, so it's quite an interesting experience.
Yes, and also last month I was able to also, for when I was visiting Stockholm, Sweden for a day, I was able to visit one of our past contributors, and he was actually able to show me around town because he lives there. And then we also went and visited Embark Studios and had a chat with one of their employees there, and discussed kind of just about the project and about Rust. And that was also very awesome to get to see their offices and share and make connections, basically.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I think so when you were like kind of like checking out Embark and stuff like that. I mean, I've seen like a lot of their like either talks or posts or like the products that they work on and stuff like that. But yeah, being able to like go see their offices and stuff, I imagine would be kind of like pretty cool and kind of meet some people on the team and stuff like that.
Yeah, it
And I
was.
suppose,
I'm very grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I was also gonna say, like, I didn't know, like, it wasn't in the forefront of my mind, but like when you put on your camera today, I'm like that, like somewhere I was like, that's True Doctor's room because like I've seen him on video before.
Indeed, it is. I have stolen his background.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that he was not available to come join for today's talk because we had originally planned that we'd both be presenting together, but he had a schedule conflict.
That would have been really cool. Like, it would have taken me a few seconds to like figure out how this was possible. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. And I guess we will see you next month with more updates on Graphite.
Yes, we will. Back to normal, then I'll be back home.
Perfect. Cheers.
Thanks.
All right, so for the last section of today's meetup, I'm going to be talking a little bit about Veloren, but one thing I do want to mention before hopping in is I've been listening to this new podcast, The Way of the Crab, and I do it on bike rides. Like I've been biking around a little bit recently, and so just like tossing it on is a lot of fun. And so it's like a podcast about Rust, but a bit more specifically, it's about two developers who are planning on working on a game together. And so we have Acton and Togglebit. And I just want to do a little bit of a shout out just because I've been enjoying the like listening to the podcast, but also because Acton has been on the Rust Gamedev Meetup before to talk about a project. Well, sort of. I sort of suppose there's a cuckoo clock. I suppose it was work on like a database for a game, but Acton also showed off a little bit of a game that they were working on, and so I suppose maybe this is like a little bit of the successor to that. But I just want to do a shout out before hopping over to some stuff about Veloren. And so first off, I do want to mention that we did have our 0.15 release for Veloren 1 week ago. Normally what happens is that I keep forgetting that like the second Saturday of each month is like the Rust Gamedev Meetup, and so I tend to schedule like we schedule releases, and we're like, oh, is the second Saturday all right? And I'm like, yep, that's fine. But we did this one before, and so it's 2 separate days. But with this release, we got some pretty cool new things. We got some like new dungeons and stuff like that. We have airships that allow you to now be controlled by players. One of the systems that I'm like pretty interested in is like a reputation system where like information is sort of spread around. Like if you do something bad, then NPCs will remember it, and then also that NPCs will be able to like move between towns, go around the world, and actually have sort of like their own. I don't know if it would be like memory necessarily, but be able to bring context between towns. Okay, so like this is like the bigger changelog that we just put out, but I do want to hop into the game and show off. Actually, wait, before I do that, I want to show off one more blog post that I want to recommend. So Christoph recently, or like one of the core developers, he put together this amazing blog post about the last 5 years of Veloren, because we had sort of like our 5th birthday. And so with this post, it goes through like a lot of like the beginnings of Veloren and what sort of like inspired stuff, what the first engine looked like, and then all the way up to like the modern era, sort of like what's going on. And so I haven't read this section yet. Okay, I haven't gone through the whole thing, but then we got some like big developer notes here at the bottom. All right. Anyways, I'll go read that later. But I do want to show off some stuff in game. And let me just switch my screen over here. All right. Okay. So, and I'm going to do a bit of cheating here because I am an admin on the game server. Let me just, hopefully, I'm using a mouse on my lap, and so it's not the best for playing games. Okay. Okay. Sorry to everybody who's playing on the main game server right now and had that very fast night phase. All right, let's see if I can move around a bit. Okay, so what I want to try and show off. So for each release party of recent, we've had one of our sort of like artists be working on the release party maps, and so I'm just going to bring us up to this area over here and talk about it a little bit. So with our release parties, what we like to do is have these maps that aren't procedurally generated like the rest of the world, but instead are like are handcrafted, and so we can go in and set up these like beautiful scenes, load them into the map. People can come in and play them, and then we can work on building these outside of like Veloren editor, and you can build them in like I think we use like Magic of Voxel, and so Hannibal, one of our contributors, did a ton of work on this release party, setting this entire area up. And it's a fun way to kind of step outside of what feels like normal Veloren to have something a little bit special for a release party. Now that being said, we kind of like don't really have a place to put it in the world, and so we just go into the middle of a lake and spawn it in the middle, and so you can kind of like just go around. We have some interesting lighting effects over here. I'm curious as to what is preventing, or maybe it's just like a big shadow. That'd be kind of interesting. Oh, is it probably also because I turned my graphics settings down all the way so I can stream? All right, I did want to try and find another area down here. Now, so during the release party, historically, we've had about like 200 to 300 players on for release parties. I think at our peak, we hit like probably close to like 400, which is like the server max. Everything just goes terrible. But we recently also upgraded our game server, and so we have we changed it from a Hetzner AX101 to a Hetzner AX102, and this effectively changed not really much. We have the same number of threads, but it goes to like a Zen 3 core over a Zen 2 when you have like DDR5 memory over DDR4. And so for us, opportunities like this kind of give us the ability to say, okay, we had a 300 or 400 player limit cap before everything goes terrible. Well, more realistically, 300. What does it look like now when we have 300 players online on the server versus like the full 400? And so we have some areas where during the release party we saw that there was like some interruptions and some issues. And so I think one of the things that happened was we spawned we spawned actually wait, let me switch back. Yeah, it was last week, so we can take a look through some of the charts. This should still be there. Oh, my mouse is still captured by the game. Okay. So I do often like showing this off. Just like all the graphs that we have from stuff. Okay, let's go to the last 30 days and are we only starting a week? 28. It was July 1st. Okay, so yeah, it's just like right around here. Okay, so release party's right over here. Actually, I need to go into the game server to see everything. Daisy. Okay, so I guess it's just exactly like 1 week ago. So yeah, the release party started at 1 p.m. my time. I just want to try and capture that entire thing. Okay, so release party started right about here. We had one server crash, and I'm pretty sure the server crash was because, so I think that one, I'll just go to that area. This one, okay, so we loaded in some of the new bosses that came into the game. So I think they are the Frost Gigas, I believe. This is the wrong post. Here we go. Yeah, so the Frost Giga. So I think we spawned like 10 Frost Gigas in, and then the server went pretty wacky with like amount of. Okay, maybe it wasn't the CPU. I remember that there was one point in which like yeah, so we spawned too much stuff. The CPU went crazy, and then we crashed for a little bit. But it might have been that, it might not have been. Oh, we got some slow systems here, so maybe it was. But then we also had some like networking issues. We were running into some errors where we were hitting like the max bandwidth of the instance that we have in the data center, and so we can do up to gigabit, and we were like sort of peaking out at some points, and so we have to investigate some stuff there as well. And so this is an interesting one where we want to make sure, first of all, that if you have 300 or 400 or 500 clients connected, like how much network bandwidth is that taking? Is that like unreasonable? Okay, actually, I think the CPU spike right here looks like it was when we spawned stuff in. But yeah, so with the networking, we also want to make sure that like people aren't able to do things that will ask the server to do too much, and so effectively denial of service. And so with like the investigations that we'll check out, we'll just be making sure that we have good safeguards against that in the future. Okay, yeah, so I think right here is when the Frost Gigas respond, and then we had a crazy amount of server lag right there for a few minutes. We went, oh yeah, it was beautiful. We went up from like 30 millisecond ticks up to like 600. And I mean, for myself, like release parties are always like a way to kind of see, we're stress testing, we're seeing what's going on. But especially with this, it's like, oh yeah, like this is something that it hasn't been a problem in the same way before. Like we haven't really had this, like maybe the server crashes for other reasons or whatever, but this one was like more, we were surprised when we spawned stuff in that it went crazy like this. And so yeah, that was like an exciting little experience. Okay, let's swap windows back here. All right. Yeah, so yeah, we set up these islands. We have like the release party. I think there was like an arena as well that was going on. But for everything that's here, one of the other things I wanted to maybe show off, and I think I could do it if I'm a bit higher up. Let's go back over to. Oh, actually, okay, we can sort of see it from here. So one thing I saw during the release party that I didn't know was a new feature added. And so Esther confirmed to me that it was in fact a new feature. Okay, we might be loading stuff in between here and there. Is that, so with, oh, interesting, we got like a pretty cool artifact right there. Is that a waterfall? Might be a waterfall. Okay, I can just hop on here. So you can't see it perfectly, but one of one of my favorite features about Veloren is like the ability to see mountains off in the distance. And so I'll just zoom out here so we can kind of see the map around us. Oh wow, that looks very cool. I like this aesthetic quite a lot. Anyways, you can see mountains off in the distance, and they get generated during world generation. You get the erosion that makes mountains look like the way that they are, and you get because of the erosion, you get rivers, you get lakes, all this good stuff. And because we have to preload that, then we have all of the data ahead of time as to what the entire world map looks like. And so if I zoom out here, this is the world map. Beyond this is just ocean. It's just an island. So when we had world gen set up, it's like, cool, you can see mountains off in the distance. That's amazing. We can add clouds and that looks amazing. Okay, awesome. We were able to add trees and sort of like scatter them around. And as far as I know, each of the trees here is like if I were to go to one of the trees and like we can see on the left-hand island over there. Actually, let me just, yeah, so just over here, if we were to go over there, that would turn into a real tree. It's just a smaller version right now. So it looks like there's something over there, but it's not like nuking our computer. Uh-oh, hello, okay. But what I did want to point out is we now, and you might not be able to see, it's pretty small on the cursor, but you now have, oh, okay, I'm flying. I'll go right back to where I was, hopefully. You now have the ability to like see villages at a level of detail difference. Oh no, my mouse is going wacky. Okay, let's see if I can aim myself at it and then unplug my mouse so I stop moving. Okay. Okay, perfect. Now I'm gonna do another server thing. Time dusk. And so it was dusk. Is dusk not like time midnight? Holy time change. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, that's what I want to see. That's what I want to see. I apologize to like the 80 players that are online right now. So we have like these little villages and they emit light, and I saw that off in the distance, and I'm like, it's just so beautiful. Like I love like that attention to detail where and I flew up. I'll do it right now as well. I flew up to this village, and it does map out to exactly, well, not exactly, but like obviously like a lower quality version of what's there. But we'll just fly over to there. And it just looks so good to me that it just adds so much, because with trees, especially in the dark, you can't see so much detail with them, but with just a small amount of lights. And so we can see like we're getting pretty close, and they're still the way that they are, and now they get subbed in for the houses. And of course, as a normal player who doesn't have the admin wand to fly around, you're not going to experience that jarring difference between the two. Okay, perfect. So we have the blog post about the Veloren updates. We have all of the release party was streamed, and so you can go check that out on Veloren's YouTube channel if you like. Yeah, okay, so it's been a while since I showed off Veloren, so I also don't remember, like, since the last time I showed stuff off, like what are a lot of the other differences since people might have seen it before. But yeah, so that is it for today's Rust Gamedev Meetup. A little bit shorter. We had a few different presentations here today. If you have something that you're interested in showing off, I do try to make, well, this month's GitHub issue is a bit late. It was like a few days before the meetup, but I'm going to go and try to make the next month's meetup newsletter or meetup issue right away. And so if you have something you want to show off, kind of talk about a little bit. I love seeing everything. It's always great having people out to show off stuff that they've been working on. So anyways, hope everybody has a great month, and we will see you next time.